They say the world is a book, and those who don't travel read only one page. But what if staying home isn't ignorance? What if it isn't fear of the world, but a deep understanding of what the world actually costs? What if the person who doesn't want to travel isn't missing out on life, but protecting something precious inside themselves that everyone else has learned to ignore? We live in a culture that worships movement, that equates adventure with growth, that measures a life well lived by passport stamps and Instagram feeds filled with sunsets in foreign lands. And in that culture, the person who says, "I don't really like traveling," becomes something strange. Something that needs to be explained, defended, or worse, fixed. But here's what no one talks about. Here's the truth hidden beneath the judgment, beneath the well-meaning encouragement to just try it or get out of your comfort zone. Some people don't dislike traveling because they're afraid of the world. They dislike it because they've learned, often through painful experience, that peace is not found in motion, that home is not a prison, that staying still is not the same as standing still. This is not a story about people who can't afford to travel, though that's a real and valid reason. This is about the people who could go but choose not to. The ones who feel the weight of expectation every time someone asks, "So, where are you going this year?" And they have to admit, quietly, almost apologetically, "Nowhere. I'm staying home." And in that admission, there is shame. There is the fear of being seen as boring, closed-minded, small. But what if none of that is true? What if choosing to stay is not a limitation, but a form of self-knowledge so rare that most people never find it? Let's begin. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes with travel. Not the exhaustion of jet lag or long flights, though that's part of it. This is deeper. This is the exhaustion of constantly adapting, of being in a state of alertness that never fully relaxes, of navigating unfamiliar streets, unfamiliar languages, unfamiliar social codes, all while pretending to enjoy the chaos. For some people, this is exhilarating. For others, it's draining in a way that takes weeks to recover from. And if you're one of those people, you've probably been told that you just need to travel more, that it gets easier, that the discomfort is part of the growth. But what if it doesn't get easier? What if every trip, no matter how beautiful, leaves you feeling more depleted than before? What if the photos look happy, but the person behind the camera was counting down the days until they could go home? This is the reality that no one talks about. The reality of being a person who doesn't find joy in the very thing the world insists is joyful. And it starts with a simple, uncomfortable truth. Not everyone's nervous system is built for constant novelty. We are told that travel broadens the mind, that it opens us up, that it makes us more interesting, more cultured, more alive. But the truth is more complicated. The truth is that for some people, travel doesn't broaden, it overwhelms. It doesn't open them up. It shuts them down. It doesn't make them feel more alive. It makes them feel like they're constantly performing a version of themselves that isn't real. Because here's what the travel industry, the Instagram influencers, the well-meaning friends don't tell you. Travel is not a neutral experience. It's not universally good for everyone. For some people, travel is a sensory assault. The noise, the crowds, the unfamiliar smells, the lack of routine, all of it combines into a constant state of low-level stress that never fully goes away. For some people, travel is emotionally exhausting. The pressure to have fun, to make the most of it, to justify the money spent and the time taken. The guilt of not enjoying something you're supposed to enjoy. For some people, travel is a reminder of everything they're trying to escape at home, only now they're dealing with it in a place where they have no support system, no familiar comforts, no safe space to retreat to. And for some people, travel is simply not aligned with what makes them feel whole. Because here's the thing. Not everyone finds meaning in the same places. Some people find meaning in depth, not breadth. In knowing a place intimately, not skimming the surface of many. In cultivating a life that feels rich and textured in one location, rather than scattering themselves across the globe. And there is nothing wrong with that. But the world doesn't see it that way. The world sees staying home as settling, as playing it safe, as missing out. And so the person who doesn't like to travel learns to stay quiet. to nod along when people talk about their trips, to feel a quiet shame every time someone asks, "What's your favorite place you visited?" and they realize they don't have an answer that sounds impressive. This shame is not internal. It's learned. It's cultural. It's the result of living in a society that has decided that certain experiences are universally valuable, and anyone who doesn't want them must be lacking something. But what if the opposite is true? What if the person who doesn't like traveling has something that the perpetual traveler has lost? Let's go back to the beginning, back to where this pattern was formed. Because the relationship you have with travel, with home, with movement and stillness didn't start in adulthood. It started long before you had the language to name it. Maybe you grew up in a home that was chaotic, unpredictable, a place where you never knew what mood you'd walk into, what version of your parents you'd get, what rules would apply today that didn't apply yesterday. And in that chaos, you learned that safety is not a given. That peace is something you have to create for yourself. That the only place you can truly control is your own small corner of the world. So you became someone who needs stability, who needs routine, who needs to know where the exits are, not just physically, but emotionally. And travel, with all its unknowns, feels like the opposite of safety. Or maybe you grew up in a home that moved too much. Military families, parents who chased jobs across cities, across countries, a childhood where you never stayed in one place long enough to feel like you belonged. And in that constant motion, you learned that home is not a place, it's a feeling. And that feeling is something you've been searching for your entire life. So when you finally find it, when you finally create a space that feels like yours, the idea of leaving it, even temporarily, feels like betrayal, like abandoning the one thing you fought so hard to build. Or maybe your childhood was fine, stable, loving. But somewhere along the way, you learn that you're different, that your needs are different, that what energizes other people drains you. Maybe you're an introvert in a world that celebrates extroversion. Maybe you're highly sensitive in a culture that values toughness. Maybe you're someone who processes the world deeply, and travel, with its constant influx of new information, new stimuli, new demands, feels like too much. And so you retreat, not because you're afraid of the world, but because you understand yourself well enough to know what you need. This is not a flaw, this is self-awareness. But the world treats it like a flaw, and so you start to believe that something is wrong with you. Here's what neuroscience tells us. The human brain is wired to seek novelty. New experiences trigger the release of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. This is why some people are addicted to travel, why they're constantly planning the next trip before the current one is over, why staying in one place for too long makes them feel restless, anxious, unfulfilled. Their brains are wired to crave novelty, and travel provides it in abundance. But not all brains are wired the same way. Some people have what psychologists call a high sensitivity to stimulation. Their nervous systems process information more deeply, more thoroughly. They notice things others don't. They feel things more intensely. And for these people, novelty is not always rewarding. It's often overwhelming. This is not a choice. This is biology. This is the way their nervous system is built. And when a highly sensitive person travels, their brain doesn't just experience new sights and sounds, it processes them deeply, all of them, all at once. The result is not exhilaration, it's exhaustion. Then there's the concept of familiarity preference. Some people find comfort in the known. Their brains are wired to seek patterns, predictability, routine. This doesn't make them boring, it makes them different. And in a world that values novelty above all else, difference is often pathologized. But here's the truth. There is no right way to experience the world. There is no universal path to growth, to happiness, to fulfillment. Some people grow by exploring, others grow by deepening. And both are valid. The problem is not that you don't like traveling. The problem is that you've been told your way of being is wrong. And so you carry this quiet conflict inside you, this war between who you are and who you think you should be. On one hand, you know what you need. You know that staying home feels right, that your energy is better spent on the life you're building where you are, not on escaping it for a week or two. But on the other hand, there's the voice, the one that whispers, "Everyone else loves this. What's wrong with you?" The voice that says, "You're missing out. You're wasting your life. You're going to regret this." The voice that makes you feel small every time you see a friend's travel photos, every time someone talks about their adventures, every time you have to explain, once again, why you don't have plans to go anywhere. And this conflict is exhausting, because it's not just about travel. It's about identity. It's about the fear that if you're not doing what everyone else is doing, you're doing life wrong. It's about the shame of being different in a world that punishes difference. It's about the loneliness of feeling like you're the only one who doesn't get it, the only one who doesn't feel the magic that everyone else seems to feel. And so you do one of two things. You force yourself to travel. You book trips you don't want to take. You smile for the photos. You post the updates. You perform the joy you don't feel. And the whole time, you're counting down, waiting for it to be over. Waiting to go home. Or you stop traveling altogether. You accept that this isn't for you, but you carry the shame of it. The sense that you're somehow less than, less adventurous, less interesting, less alive. And both of these responses are forms of self-abandonment. Because the real question is not whether you should travel. The real question is, why do you feel like you have to? Let's talk about what this costs you. Not the lack of travel, but the shame around it. It costs you your sense of self, because every time you apologize for who you are, every time you justify your preferences, every time you let someone make you feel small for wanting what you want, you're telling yourself that your truth doesn't matter. It costs you your relationships. Because you start avoiding conversations about travel, you start feeling resentful when people share their excitement. You start isolating yourself from experiences that might actually be meaningful, not because you don't want them, but because you're afraid of being judged. It costs you your peace, because you can't relax in your own life. You can't enjoy the richness of your daily routine, the depth of your local relationships, the beauty of the place you've chosen to call home, because you're too busy, feeling like it's not enough. And it costs you your joy. The quiet, steady joy of a life lived on your own terms. The joy of knowing yourself so well that you don't need external validation. The joy of building something meaningful in one place, rather than constantly seeking meaning elsewhere. This is what no one talks about. The hidden cost of living in a culture that tells you there's only one way to live a full life. But here's the truth. A full life is not measured by how many places you've been. It's measured by how present you are in the place you're in. And some people are more present when they stay. There comes a moment, a quiet moment, when you stop apologizing. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a dramatic realization. It's a slow shift. A gentle cracking open of the story you've been telling yourself. Maybe it happens when you finally admit, out loud, "I don't like traveling." And instead of the judgment you expect, someone says, "Me neither," and suddenly you're not alone. Maybe it happens when you stop forcing yourself to go on trips you don't want to take. And instead of feeling like you're missing out, you feel relief. Maybe it happens when you realize that the life you're building at home, the relationships you're deepening, the work you're doing, the peace you're cultivating, is just as valuable as any adventure abroad. Maybe it happens when you finally understand that growth is not about how far you go. It's about how deep you go. And you've been going deep. You've been going the work of knowing yourself, of honoring your needs, of building a life that feels true. And that is not small, that is not boring, that is not a waste, that is brave. Because it takes courage to stand still in a world that worships movement. It takes courage to stay when everyone else is leaving. It takes courage to say, "This is enough," when the world keeps telling you it's not. And you've been doing that, quietly, without recognition, without applause. But it matters. Here's what you need to hear, what you've always needed to hear. You are allowed to not like traveling. You are allowed to find joy in the familiar, in the routine, in the quiet, steady rhythm of a life that doesn't need to be documented or validated or compared. You are allowed to prefer depth over breadth, intimacy over novelty, roots over wings. You are allowed to say no to experiences that don't serve you, even if they serve everyone else. You are allowed to build a life that looks different, that feels different, that is different, because your life is yours, and you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to live it. This is not about giving up. This is not about settling. This is not about playing it safe. This is about knowing yourself well enough to honor what you need. And what you need is not less than what anyone else needs. It's just different. And different is not wrong. Healing, for you, is not about learning to love travel. It's about learning to love yourself enough to stop pretending. It's about releasing the shame, the guilt, the fear that you're missing out. It's about understanding that the life you're living, right here, right now, is not a placeholder. It's not a waiting room for the real adventure to begin. This is the adventure of building a home that feels safe, of cultivating relationships that go deep, of creating work that matters, of finding beauty in the everyday. The adventure of knowing yourself, of honoring yourself, of choosing yourself. And that is not small. That is everything. Healing is also about forgiving yourself for the times you forced yourself to go, the trips you didn't enjoy, the money you spent trying to be someone you're not. It's about understanding that you were doing the best you could with the information you had, that you were trying to fit into a world that didn't fit you, but now you know better. And knowing better means you get to choose differently. It means you get to say, "This isn't for me," without shame. It means you get to build a life that feels true, even if it doesn't look like anyone else's. It means you get to stay, and that staying is not failure, it's choice. Integration is about holding both truths. That travel is valuable for some people, and that it's not valuable for you, that there's nothing wrong with the people who love it, and there's nothing wrong with you for not loving it, that the world is vast and beautiful, and that you can appreciate that beauty without needing to chase it. That home is not a prison. It's a sanctuary, and you've spent years building that sanctuary. And it's okay to want to stay in it. This is not about closing yourself off. It's about opening yourself up to the possibility that you've been enough all along, that your life, as it is enough, that you, as you are enough. And here, in this understanding, there is peace, not the peace of resignation, but the peace of acceptance. The peace of knowing that you don't have to prove anything to anyone, that you don't have to live a life that looks impressive from the outside if it feels empty on the inside, that you can choose stillness, and that stillness is not stagnation, it's presence, and presence is where life actually happens, not in the next destination, not in the next adventure, but here, now, in the life you're living, in the place you're in the person you're becoming. And that person is not defined by how many stamps are in their passport. That person is defined by how deeply they know themselves, how honestly they live, how bravely they choose their own path, even when it's the road less traveled. And you've been on that road. You've been walking it, quietly, steadily. And it's time to stop apologizing for it. It's time to own it, not with defiance, but with quiet confidence. The confidence that comes from knowing that your life is yours, and that you're living it in the way that feels most true. And that is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to be honored. If this reflection felt familiar, if you've carried the quiet weight of feeling different, of being the one who doesn't understand the appeal of constant movement, of wondering if something is wrong with you because you'd rather stay home, know that you are not alone. There are so many people who feel the same way, who've been told their whole lives that they're missing out, who've forced themselves to travel because they thought they had to, who've carried the shame of preferring the familiar over the foreign. And if that's you, if you've ever felt that weight, this is your permission to let it go. You don't owe anyone an adventure. You don't owe anyone a passport full of stamps. You don't owe anyone a life that looks like theirs. You owe yourself truth. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself the freedom to build a life that feels good, not a life that looks good. If you'd like to stay connected to this space, you're welcome here. This is a place where we explore the hidden corners of the human heart, the parts that don't fit, the parts that are misunderstood, the parts that are tired of pretending. This is not a place for judgment, this is a place for understanding, for seeing the truth beneath the shame, for honoring the ways we're all different and celebrating that difference instead of trying to fix it. If that resonates with you, if you'd like more of these conversations, you're invited to stay, and if you'd like, you can share your own quiet truth below. Not because you have to, but because your words might help someone else feel less alone, because your story might be the permission someone else needs to finally stop apologizing for who they are. There is no right way to live, there is only your way. And your way is valid. It's enough. It's beautiful. You don't have to go anywhere to prove your worth. You don't have to collect experiences like trophies. You don't have to live a life that fits someone else's definition of full. You can stay. You can build. You can deepen. You can root yourself in one place and grow in ways that no one else can see but you can feel. And that is not less than. That is everything. Be kind to the part of you that wants to stay. Honor the part of you that finds peace in the familiar. Celebrate the part of you that knows what you need, even when the world tells you you're wrong. You are not wrong. You have never been wrong. You are just different. And different is where the truth lives. Take care of yourself. You deserve to live a life that feels true, not a life that looks right.